But case in point, of course, is being autos and also how Maruti stayed insulated from coronavirus. The impact of BS6 shift coupled with the move to all petrol production. Let's take all these questions forward to Shashank Srivastava, the ED at Maruti Suzuki, joining us on the show right now. Shashank, morning. Good to have you on the show. Almost all of the auto manufacturers in India have said that they could be hit as component supply disruption is currently happening because of the ongoings in China. What's kept Maruti insulated?
Actually, this is a question which I keep asking my supply chain guys every day. According to them, at this time, till this time, there has been no problem. But you know, we live in a globalized world, and while they explained to me that there is no tier 1 supplier from China. However, we may have tier 2, tier 3 suppliers who may be sourcing components from China. So at the moment, there seems to be no issue with production, and we are getting vehicles as per the normal schedule. Going forward, I don't know how long this will continue. Obviously, if it continues for very long, there could be issues. But at the moment, we don't have any problem with production or availability of vehicles.
Okay, good to hear that. Your transition to BS6 as well was quite brisk. Does that give you a huge advantage, especially at a time like this when your peers' production is suffering because of the supply constraints?
Actually, you're very right. We have exited from BS4 altogether. As you know, we stopped producing BS4 vehicles from the last week of January, and we are now producing only BS6 vehicles. And one of the key reasons for this smooth transition has been that well ahead of the government mandated date of 1st April 2020, Maruti Suzuki started getting BS6 vehicles almost a year ahead of schedule. So in April, we got the best-selling Baleno and Alto into BS6, and subsequently within a couple of months we got Swift and WagonR and Desire also, and now we are 100% BS6. So that has helped, of course, and with the result that the stock management at the dealership is also very much under control. And this obviously gives us some advantage in these months because we are going to supply vehicles normally. So yes, there is an advantage that's reflected also in the market share that you would have seen in the last 4 months that we have had. There is a substantial increase, and also, of course, I must tell you, it's a great with great pride that I can say that almost 700,000 vehicles of BS6 we have already sold, and they are running on Indian roads.
Can the outbreak of coronavirus be an opportunity perhaps for increasing manufacturing in India? And, could it really mean the growth of Make in India?
Obviously, in a market like India, where the large, we are the 4th largest or the 5th largest passenger vehicle industry in the world. So obviously, we have the volumes, and it makes sense to have localization. And I think that's something which OEMs always have understood, and Maruti Suzuki has been at the forefront as far as localization is concerned. So I think that is not going to go away. In fact, probably this is something which is going to add to that thing altogether.
And for you, the shift to BS6 is not the only transition, since you're also at the same time moving diesel models to petrol. Are you confident of replicating a diesel model success, especially for models like the Brezza with petrol variants? And do you think you can make up for the volumes with petrol?
Yeah, so we are pretty confident, and that's what our hope is, that we'll replace the diesel volumes with petrol volumes and also with CNG. And there is a reason for it. It's not just a hope in the air, because at the time when, if you look at the past, the last 4 or 5 years, at one point of time, diesel was 60% of industry. Last month, that is in February, it was 15%, less than 15% actually. So obviously this decline for diesel has come about because of two major reasons. One is the fuel price gap between petrol per liter and diesel per liter has actually reduced from what it used to be 31, 32 rupees earlier to less than 6 rupees on an average in India. In fact, there are some states like Goa or Gujarat or Jharkhand or Orissa where some diesel is almost same priced as gasoline, and that makes it therefore economically there is no sense for any consumer to go in for diesel, especially small diesel, because the price gap between a diesel and a petrol of a similar car is extremely high. And the second reason which makes it high is actually that the transition to from BS4 to BS6, for gasoline, the transition cost, for example, for Maruti has been between 8 to 12,000 rupees, but for diesel it's going to be very, very high, as you can see from some of the prices which have been announced by competitors who have gone in for BS6. So a very big difference between the acquisition cost of a diesel car and a petrol car, and the very small differential in the fuel prices now makes it essentially economically, it doesn't make any sense for a consumer unless he is running about 4,500 to 5,000 kilometer travel every month. But on an average, as research shows, the Indian consumer actually travels just about 10,000, 11,000 kilometers in a year, which is about 900 to 1,000 kilometers in a month. So unless he's doing 5 times what is the average, it doesn't make sense at all to have diesel. And I think that's very much reflected in the way diesel percentage has come down. And last month, as I just mentioned, it came down to less than 15%.
How are you trying to cushion the impact of the absence in diesel? How justified are the street's concerns over, the market share loss now that you'll only be making petrol models?
Yeah, so I think I can completely understand where the analysts are coming from, because I think there is also, while I stressed upon the fact that economically it doesn't make sense for people to go in for diesel, but there are a lot of people, especially in the bigger diesel category, who go in for diesel not just for reasons of economy of running, but also for other requirements like a higher torque or something like that. And as I just mentioned, there are a section of consumers like fleet owners who actually run the vehicle for a much larger than the average running distances for the consumer. So I think that section of people is what these analysts are referring to. And we have always said that if we find that despite the high price differences, and remember some of the competitors have not yet announced prices of BS6 diesel. So if we find that even despite the very large difference between a BS6 diesel acquisition cost and a BS6 gasoline price, if there are a category of consumers who still prefer in the larger, we are quite convinced in smaller diesel it doesn't make sense at all, because in fact in hatches, for example, the diesel percentage is now less than 4%. So if it happens that there are some category of consumers, and I think that's what the analysts are referring to, if they still prefer the diesel, we will always say, we have said that we can take a look at whether Maruti Suzuki can have a BS6 diesel in the larger diesel category.
Do you plan to tap into increasing the share of petrol in smaller SUVs? Give us some color on the product portfolio. Will they be refreshers or new models? And to what extent can that help to retain the 50% market share, with all the competition we currently have?
Yeah, so again, I think you have done your research very nicely, because our market share in the passenger car segment and the van segment has actually increased hugely. It is the SUV category where we have seen some weakening because a lot of new models came in. We have the Kia Seltos, or we have the MG Hector, we have the Hyundai Venue and the Hyundai Creta, which is giving a sort of a competition for our own offering of Brezza. But remember, Brezza was 100% diesel. Now it's 100% gasoline. It's got a much larger engine, much more power. It's a K15, very capable, and actually a famed Suzuki K15 engine. So that entire diesel, which 100% diesel offering of Brezza should convert to petrol. And that's what we are doing. So in that sense, it's an absolutely new car. We'll also have a S-Cross, which we have announced coming in the petrol version. Very shortly, we will be launching the new S-Cross. And also, I must say that this shift in the industry, the consumer preference seems to be for the SUV design. In India, SUV isn't like the traditional SUV you find internationally. It's not about four-wheel driving or off-roading. It's about design elements like a high bonnet or a high ground clearance or a good driving position, a high driving position. And that is something which we are trying to incorporate in some of our recent launches. And that is irrespective of the category. So even in the small car category, we have the Espresso, which is like more SUV-ish in design, as you can see, as you would know. You have recently we launched the Ignis in the Auto Expo, which is also a small SUV vehicle. It's SUV category, at least in the design part. Then we had launched the XL6 about 4 or 5 months back, which is doing so well. It was in the MPV base. It's an MPV derivative, but it is essentially a SUV design. And we also have the new S-Cross and the new Brezza. So I think we have a good range of vehicles from one category right up to the MPV category, which are more SUV-ish in design. Now, so I think we are trying to cover that, but as we go ahead, and you rightly pointed out, there's going to be increased competition in this segment, and I'm not able to give you a forward guidance on our product plan in this regard, because that is something which we keep to ourselves till we are actually about to launch a product.
Tell us a little bit about the volume trend as well. You know, while the billing has slowed down for the auto industry, how have the retails been panning out?
Yeah, so retails for us, retails actually increased over last month. Wholesale were just about similar, but then that may not be the trend in the industry. Because as I told you, we pushed out of BS4 a couple of months back altogether. We have a very low stock of BS4, and therefore our wholesale and retail would roughly match. But I understand that is not the position in the industry, and some of the manufacturers have had a high level of BS4 stocks, and therefore they will need to modulate their BS4 or BS6 wholesales. But as far as we are concerned, it's roughly similar. Wholesale were a little less in February than January, but retails were slightly higher than what we saw in January.
Right. You know, after the last quarter numbers, you'd highlighted that growth and recovery is going to be faster for rural markets as opposed to urban. Do rural and semi-urban markets now continue to see more upside as opposed to urban?
Yeah, so again, I think you're very right. Your statistics seem to be bang on, because yes, in February as well as in January, as well as in the third quarter, the rural growth has been higher than the urban growth. In fact, in the last couple of months, the rural growth has been about 10%, almost 10% higher than the urban growth. Going forward, I'm not so sure. Of course, rural will become a very large company. In fact, for Maruti Suzuki, it is already 40% of our total volumes. Our reach is very good in rural, but we need to go even further, because as prosperity spreads, especially in the rural areas, there is a lot of upside to be had as far as car penetration is concerned in rural areas. On the urban side, yes, there have been some places where there has actually been a negative growth. So yes, you are right. The growth seems to be more in rural areas, and this is the phenomena we have seen in the last, not just last 4 or 5 months, but actually in the last 5 or 6 years.
All right, thanks for that detailed chat on how you're strategizing on the way forward, and for joining us this morning.